Good day and welcome to this DEKRA webinar about consumer IoT and especially about the testing and certification for cybersecurity. IoT, or in other words the Internet of Things, is more than just a buzzword. It's the future of the connected world in which all different devices are connected to each other, and with billions of devices also enormous amounts of data are generated. Nowadays so many devices are connected for the Internet that not only safety is at stake but also security. We'll come back to that in a minute. Today we focus on consumer IoT, and you can question actually what is consumer IoT Well, that is the phrase that is used for a wide array of connected devices. And you can think of personal IoT, think like smartwatches or smart wearables. You can think of smart home, IoT, media systems, smart thermostat systems, entertainment, but also voice assistants. Think of Alexa, Google Assistant, Apple. That's also a new era which is coming into play as well, and which is a growing area. So that also means that a lot of new products are being introduced to the market, and it also means that the market is growing rapidly and significantly. And that has a number of reasons, of course. I think one of the most important reasons is the fact that we now have a high degree of internet penetration globally. Not only that, but also we have high-speed internet. We have 5G and in future even 6G coming up. So high data capabilities on that. And this new infrastructure really supports IoT. And the infrastructure really supports the functioning of IoT as well. Apart from that, also on the manufacturer side, a lot of things are happening. Manufacturers are spending a lot of money at the moment on R&D for IoT products, for devices and for applications. And not unimportant as well is that people have more money to spend and actually demand a better lifestyle as well. They want more comfort in their lives, they want more comfort in their homes. So they have money available to spend on IoT products, and especially on IoT consumer products, which is the topic of today. The result actually is that we see a widespread adoption of IoT products. We see a widespread adoption of applications for that. And as we have the smartphone as well in our pockets all day, every moment of the day almost, you see that these applications are being integrated as well from that perspective. If you look to the market growth, it's pretty impressive as well. There was a consumer IoT market report which estimated that the sales of this market will be over 150 billion euros of sales worth in 2026, which is quite a staggering amount. And the expectations are that home automation and smart energy management system will take over as kind of majority of the systems being used by customers. I already said it, safety is one element, but until now, the main focus of these products has been on safety and performance. That is, of course, very important, but due to the fact that enormous amounts of devices are being connected, also security is becoming quickly another key element to take into account. So in other words, connectivity and IoT really are transforming the consumer products. And that also means that consumer safety is at stake due to the risks that cybersecurity is bringing to the table here as well. So security requirements for IoT products and especially for consumer IoT devices, they have been defined. They have been issued in standards as well by numerous organizations. And we will also today inform you about the different standards and certification schedule behind that. So the topic of today, testing and certification possibilities for consumer IoT products. And I'm really happy to introduce my colleague Rubén Lirio, who is manager of the business line Cybersecurity for the Service Division product testing of DEKRA. So Rubén, can you take us into the world of consumer IoT and especially the threats of cybersecurity?
Yes, for sure, Vincent. Thank you very much for the introduction. Really good introduction. As you say, there is no doubt that the cybersecurity is a trending topic right now, but also for many manufacturers or system integrators, it represents a real challenge before launching the product. So these are the content that we are going to cover today, remarking what are the possibilities that the manufacturer have to test and certify cybersecurity. First, we are going to see what are the challenges that the manufacturer and integrator face when they have to launch a product. This will be a fundamental part to see how the service should be. In the second point, we are going to review some current initiatives in several countries, regions, regarding to cybersecurity. In the third point, we are going to review what is the real option that the manufacturer or system integrator have on the table to test and certify the cybersecurity of the product. The fourth, what should be the criteria to choose a certification program by them? The fifth, what is the value that the TIC companies like DEKRA shall offer compared to others? And the sixth, last but not least, lesson learned from our customers during this time. So, as we say, if we want to offer service that makes sense for our customer, what we have to understand what the challenge that they are facing. They are different challenges. We have technical challenge, we have market access challenge, or budgetary challenge. For example, if we talk about the budgetary, it's clear that cybersecurity is not a regulatory requirement for them. It's still an unnecessary cost. And I say this in quotation marks because later, when you speak with them, when you speak with them, the customer point out that one of the main concerns are cybersecurity and privacy. These both are two fundamental pillars from their product. But this is connected to the fact that the budget, not always, but in some cases, is usually limited. The sale price is low for this kind of devices, and the product will have a fairly short life cycle if you compare with other markets like industrial sector or automotive. But even if the life cycle is short, you have to ensure that the product to be secure throughout its whole life cycle. This is why it's necessary to implement remotely update, at least for the security patches, because your product will be secure today, but what's happened tomorrow? Another of the significant challenge that the manufacturer face every day when we talk about connected consumer devices is the interoperability and the usability. You need to make easier to the end user to use the devices, which leads to a fairly extensive attack surface for any external attacker. So last but not least, we have to understand that usually the device is not just a device. In order to make it more usable, this device usually has mobile application, as we mentioned before, or some management capabilities through internet. These 2 points that we cannot ignore when we want to evaluate the security of the whole product. These are the limitations. This is the challenge that we have to understand really, really well if we want to offer to the manufacturer and system integrator services regarding to certification and testing. Okay, the cybersecurity of products is a challenge, no doubt, but this challenge is not only affect the manufacturer or system integrator, but also affect to the government that have to ensure that the use of the devices is secure, safe, and comply with other regulations like privacy. We see that more and more countries launch different initiatives to address this challenge, to offer some regulation initiatives, best practice around IoT consumer devices. Some countries bet for labeling program, for example, Singapore, Finland, or USA. Other regions, for example, European Union, develop horizontal laws like GDPR for privacy or the European Cybersecurity Act. It's an horizontal act that addresses different certification schemes, for example, like common criteria for cloud, but also for IoT devices. Other countries, as UK or Australia, have published a voluntary code of practice. It's a guideline for the manufacturer to follow to implement the devices. But in any case, all these initiatives and more, sooner or later, will be essential requirements that manufacturers have to meet before launching the product to the market. Okay, but what is the current situation? What are the tools that the manufacturer have to test and certify the cybersecurity? One is product testing. Here it's important to understand that there are two different possibilities, against a standard or through a product penetration testing. It's also important that these tests are aligned with current and future regulatory requirements. When we talk about testing against a standard, perhaps the benchmark within the consumer IoT market is ETSI EN 303645. This standard was developed by ETSI, contains 13 security provisions, among which are non-universal default password, make easy for the user to delete the user data, minimize expose attack surface, ensure the software integrity. But on top of that, you have privacy provision, six privacy provision. It's expected that the manufacturer more and more provide features inside the consumer IoT devices that support the protection of such personal data. When we talk about NIST 8259, it's a family of standards for IoT devices. It contains Part A, B, C, and D. Part A covers all the technical capabilities that the IoT devices have to implement. Part B is the not technical capability. C explains how to create a profile using A and B. And D is the result to define the requirement to establish a guidance for federal agencies to buy IoT devices. This guidance is allowed to the manufacturer to implement cybersecurity capabilities on the IoT devices. Okay, what happens when we talk about product penetration testing? We have to take into account some aspects. Okay, the first one is not the same as looking for a black box approach when you don't have a lot of information about the product, just the information that you have inside the box or the information that you can find on the internet. That's if you are talking about in a white box approach, where the collaboration of the manufacturer is necessary. To execute the assessment, they have to provide information, sometimes source codes, and many things to finalize the assessment. Finally, it's usually agreed with the customer to provide certain product information to make this evaluation more effective. Other points to consider are also the limitations that the customer has. For example, imagine a product with 3 different parts. You have the devices, the hardware devices, you have a mobile application, and you have some services on the cloud. For one reason or another, the manufacturer decides not include the cloud services in the evaluation. This is something that you have to discuss with the customer. Another possibility or strategy to testing and certify the devices that the manufacturer can follow to show that the product meets certain security requirements are the labeling scheme. Normally, the major motivation is to prove that the product meets certain security requirements, and this opens the door to certain markets. Some examples are, for example, in Finland. Traficom developed a labeling scheme where the self-declaration of the manufacturer is allowed. By other hand, Singapore have a different approach. It consists of several levels, specifically 4 levels. The first 2 levels can be a self-declaration, but to get the highest level, 3 and 4, an evaluation by a laboratory authorized by the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore is necessary. By the way, these 2 schemes are based on the previous mentioned standard, ETSI EN 303645. Finally, within the execution order on improving the national cybersecurity signed by the President Biden on May 12th, NIST is urged to propose a labeling scheme for IoT products in the next 270 days. As far as we know, both IoT Alliance and the CTI scheme could be based for the new labeling scheme in USA. Okay, the last strategy to test and certify the devices is use industry certification program. Here we list some of them. For example, IoT is a scheme that allows self-evaluation and evaluation by the recognized laboratory. They have a baseline profile that apply almost any IoT devices. And on top of that, they develop a different vertical profile to test a specific product or application. The approach in CTIA IoT cybersecurity program is a little bit different. For example, the number of devices under this scheme is limited to the type of wireless technology they use. Only devices with cellular or Wi-Fi technology are candidates for certification. In addition to this, CTIA has 3 different levels, and the evaluation must be performed by a recognized laboratory. Another example, perhaps it's a little bit different, is the Amazon Alexa program. If the manufacturer wants to develop a device with the Alexa technology inside them, they shall to perform an independent security assessment by a recognized lab authorized by Amazon. It's a different approach.
So Rubén, that's a good overview of the aspects which play a role in choosing the certification program. But suppose that I'm a manufacturer, what would your advice be really how to choose the certification schedule and how to choose that?
Yeah, but for me, it's clear. I think the main question that you have to solve it before choose one program or other is what is my target market? Is mandatory for entering this market or using this technology, I have to pass this accreditation? If I get some advantage against my competitor if I certify my product, I think this is the first one. And then the second will be if my product meet the security requirement. But the main one is what is my target.
I think that's a good combination of your target market and the requirements that the market would have. So actually start from market perspective as a first step, and then go through the different aspects. Thanks. I think that is a valuable piece of advice for manufacturers. So yeah, please continue.
Okay, thank you. So right now, after all, what the customer expects from a testing, inspection, and certification company like DEKRA. Okay, the first things that TIC company offer a wide catalog of solutions for testing and certification, but not also for cybersecurity. We offer services in connectivity, EMC, regulatory, type approval. So this makes to choose a TIC company a really cost-effective solution to test as well the cybersecurity. After that, you have they have to look if the company have a testing team with proven experience in product evaluation. It's not easy to find good experts. So how many years of experience, certification that they have, past project, certification of the company. So this is, for me, the pillar, the technical expertise that the company has. Another important aspect when the companies come to us is to support them to understand what is the current requirement to access to the market, but also the future requirement. It's important to explain in a clearly way to the manufacturer what is the state of the product and what is the improvement that they have to do to comply with the future regulation. And finally, rigor and excellence, both in the execution of the test and in the project management. We are talking about something really, really serious, like security, so this is a must.
Okay, so Rubén, thanks very much for giving this overview on what, in our experience, customers are expecting from a tech company like ours. We do have our international teams which do a lot of testing and certification of cybersecurity products in place as well. I think it's interesting to share what, from your experience, is the aspect which is the most complicated for manufacturers, because you have shown a lot of experts now. What, in your view, is the most difficult one for them?
Yeah, for sure, Vincent. It's a really good question. So many times, security has not been taken into account from the initial stage of the development in the design phase. So it may be difficult to solve certain vulnerabilities that we found during the testing and certification. So, for example, if they choose a microprocessor in the very beginning, and then this microprocessor has a critical vulnerability, you have to change the design of your devices to mitigate this vulnerability. Or, for example, you choose wrong algorithms to encrypt information or something like that. So, can be easily improved these vulnerabilities and others if you take into account the security from the design of the devices. Probably this is the more complicated aspect to explain performed by the manufacturers.
Which actually is a easy answer to a difficult question, to tackle a difficult problem. That's really interesting what you say, because we know from our experience that the same actually applies when you talk about connectivity or safety, and that a lot of the costs involved in correcting things later on are caused by the design phase. And also for other aspects like safety and connectivity or EMC, we always say make sure that at the design phase you take these things already into account. So even the technology is changing and the aspects are changing with cybersecurity, this very old adagium like make sure that you include it in the design stage still is applicable. So that's interesting to share that insight. Thanks for that, Rubén. So please.
Okay. So, how will this regulation that are reaching customer affect? Basically, today manufacturers define security criteria or parameters in their devices to operate in a normal way. But when the new regulation framework will establish, this will be the minimum requirements. So this is important. For many manufacturers, it will be a challenge to comply with. For others, that they already have security included in the development process that we mentioned before, it will be simply one step more. The problem is that if you want, if the regulation is here and you want to launch your product and you don't meet the security requirement, you have two options: launch the product anyway, or wait to fix all the security problem that you have. In the first one, you are open to fines or sanctions, and the second one, probably you go to the market later than your competitor. For that reason, it's important, even if the regulation is not here yet, start to work to adapt your product and your procedures to your internal procedure, taking into account the security from a really important point of view. So, however, once the regulation comes through, the reliability of the end user in the product will be a situation that allows us to live in a safer world. So this is wonderful. So finally, what we have learned from our customer, this is important. The customer teach us a lot of things. So the first things that the customer see when they are looking for a evaluation is the goal for the customer is mitigating as possible the vulnerability and align to comply with future regulation framework, as we mentioned before. Normally, the customer is looking for a penetration testing with a gray box approach that we mentioned before and limited in time, 2, 3, 4 weeks, executed by the professionals certified. Normally, after this part, is intended to use this evaluation work to pass some certification. 1, 2, it depends on the marketing strategy of this or business strategy of this manufacturer, making some additional testing. Okay? In short, they are looking for a cost-effective solution that spends time delivering value in a security point of view with little administrative burden.
So thanks, Rubén, for giving this overview and giving the insight in what customers actually are looking for and what our experience is with working with customers. I think that's very valuable for other manufacturers as well in understanding that. We also talked about developments and new things. The question to me actually would be, what developments do you see in the near future that would have an effect on testing and certification for cybersecurity, especially for consumer IoT products?
Yeah, without any doubt, the new regulation. Right now, cybersecurity is a nice to have, even if the manufacturer understands that it's a really important pillar, the budget is limited. So this is something that they have to put on top of their budget. And as we say in the very beginning of this webinar, the budget is limited. So when the regulation comes through, is one of the things that is a key element to launch the product. So I think this will be the key factor to take into account the cybersecurity from the very beginning.
So in other words, watch out for the regulations coming up from that point of view. We are at the end of the webinar. I hope you enjoyed the webinar and I hope you enjoyed the information. One final question for you, Rubén. What would be your final advice for manufacturers who want to sell consumer IoT products?
Yeah, if security is taken into account from the very beginning of the product development, the testing and certification process will be much simpler, in addition to assuring the customer that the product works in a secure, safe, and respecting the privacy of the user.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that's a welcome advice. We hope you enjoyed watching this webinar. Stay tuned, because more webinars will follow as well. Thank you very much, and see you next time.